It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, when using Google products, hold Shift while pasting to paste without formatting.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends, and today's host, Nick, and with me is
Tom
And KJ.
Additionally, joining us as a guest this week is
Ryan.
Thanks for joining us today. Ryan works in the film industry, helping to release independent films. Ryan has joined us for Time Crimes and Memories of Matsuko. Ryan conveniently still likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round one, each question is worth 1 point, and in round two, each question is worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today, we're going back to 1973 in Germany for a television miniseries directed by Rainer Werner Fassbinder called World on a Wire. If you weren't watching World on a Wire on TV, you could have been watching The Peculiar Life Story of Frederick Baron von der Trenck, or have seen the premiere of the controversial show Neuzen aus der Provinz, as well as the recently restored miniseries 8 Hours Don't Make a Day. The highest grossing film in Germany in 1973 was Papillon. In World on a Wire, we meet Fred Stiller, a German lush who, between sexual conquests, has developed an AI world populated with thinking people within a computer. After his partner Volmir mysteriously dies and his co-worker Gunther Lauser mysteriously disappears, Stiller is placed in charge, despite the fact that he never does any actual work and drinks most of the day. But when things get weird, Stella grabs his widow's peak and investigates, stumbling upon corporate corruption, sexy secretaries, and existential crises, but not without taking some time to sit in every single chair in any room he occupies, no matter how short his stay or how many chairs the room has. Will Stella save the company and Greater Germany from the terrors of capitalism? Will he sleep with every secretary he has? Will he ever learn how not to overact? Watch and see. Nick, if you had only one word to describe World on a Wire, what would it be?
Simulacron. KJ?
Lauza. Ryan?
Style.
And my word would be non-binary.
It's time for question one.
Who is everyone at IKZ ultimately answering to?
Oh, no.
So, just
Yeah.
for the co-host,
Yeah.
it may be in the notes.
Are you hinting that he should cheat?
Well, they're in the notes. Like
Or are
anybody
you
can
just,
see
I'm
them.
not going to look.
I won't look either. I'm going to lock in. I still think there could be two answers here.
I'm out of my depth, so I'm just going to lock in.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, Tom. I'm locked in.
Okay, KJ, what do you have?
All right, so I'm locked in with Siskins because he was the boss man.
Is he sideburns?
He's Sideburns, yeah, the guy.
Okay.
Yep, and he does the dance in the middle.
Okay, that guy's definitely not in charge. You're wrong. I'm telling you right now.
Well, then,
Anyway, go on.
My
go
other
on.
answer would be Remington Steel because I can't remember the name of the steel company that everybody's answering to. So, but
Oh,
I'm
the
sticking with
dark
Siskins.
answer. Okay, yeah.
Siskins.
All right, Ryan's next. What do you have?
I do like that you went right for the steel, like the dark, like they're being controlled by this, shadow interest. I was going to be more, more normcore and say it was like the government guy when they had the meeting with the government dude, that guy.
Okay, and Nick, what do you have?
Well, before I answer this question, I think it was just an accomplishment that I finished this movie on time. So I already feel like I won, but I will participate in today's episode too. So needless to say, I was thinking it was a trick when you were going to say Siskin, because he's the head of that company, but you said, who does the company report to? And while KJ's answer is interesting, I also was similar to Ryan. They report to the government, specifically that secretary or whatever his name is, his title, because this is government financed.
And the points go to Nick and Ryan.
Woohoo!
IKZ does report to the government, specifically Secretary of State Van Weinlab. And I bring this question up just to talk about the kind of circumstance we find ourselves in, where the company is in relationship to its responsibilities, as well as to this kind of sense of corruption that's beginning to walk into the company.
So in the Matrix, the machine's goal is to make batteries, right? The reason they have their simulation is to keep the batteries in check.
Mm-hmm.
In World on a Wire, the goal is unclear if it's the government that's running it, right? But if it's the steel company that is making the decisions and lining the pockets of the people who are running it, then the goal of the simulation is to predict, I think they were focused on transportation needs in the future so that they could decide how they were going to move their steel around, or if they needed steel to build boats, or if they should be building trucks, whatever it was.
It wasn't just steel, KJ. It was more of the economy in general. Is it plastics? Is it steel? Where should we be investing in?
Okay.
So the steel industry was trying to exploit that power by having, access to it when other people couldn't have access to it, where it was supposed to be the state would be the only one who would have access. But you're right. I'm just going a little bit bigger in one area. So in this case, the power of the simulation is information to predict the future, which is crazy. It's pretty darn powerful.
I have to say, I'm actually a little surprised to be right, just because I can't believe the government was funding such a nice, like a cushy operation. It just, everything about it said private funding. And I know you're sensing that I'm a one-note pony or whatever mixed metaphor I can use here on this, but like, my goodness, that was a stylish office for a government-run organization.
Yeah.
Well, they're government financed. It was a separate private entity, but they were being financed by so that's why you got a little bit of both and a lot of snazzy furniture.
The $400 toilet seats and
exactly.
I was going to say, to Ryan's point, that is, I think it's most of this movie is about the style, because I think what you could kind of see the surprise coming pretty far in advance. It's not
Yes.
For 3.5 hours.
Everyone but poor Stiller. Yeah, he was really shocked.
Yeah, but I think the movie's about dwelling on this kind of stylish, the stylish decor and these stylish people.
So I'll probably say it a lot during the episode, but just like The Matrix, right? The Matrix was also not all about style, but style is a big part of The Matrix. The trench coats, the technologically looking, I'll say futuristic stuff, but it's more just modern stuff. Similar to World on a Wire, where everything kind of looks like Epcot, right? It's that dream of the future. I guess in this case, it's the 70s. Epcot feels a little more 80s to me, but I guess it was being built in the 70s. So
it's hard for us to know, just because we weren't alive then, but also, how much of that is like German practicality and perceived style versus like what was futuristic. But I mean, of course, with a lot of the shots, they're going out of their way. He was shooting through the glass or, vases and stuff like that. So obviously, like I was meant to be drawn to that. It wasn't just like, what? This is an office. What are you looking at?
Then you throw up all those mirrors, the spaces look even bigger.
Yeah, I think the mirror thing is important.
And maybe everyone has a pool like that. Like we don't know. We weren't there.
Oh, that indoor pool. Yeah.
He walked around it, I think, twice. No reason, but it was like the chairs.
It's so convenient.
Whenever you
it's
can
just
move.
like it was right next to the dining room. It's like anytime you wanted a dip, it was just so convenient.
I couldn't help but think that's like a swinger's house. You know what I mean? That's not like an average person's house.
That was Ava's house, right? That was Ava's house.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also think, I do think that the glass stuff is is important, right? This idea of like you're seeing everything through a mirror, a kind of a reflection that also doesn't reflect everything quite right. It's, you know, that seems to be on brand, especially for the fact that the camera you almost never see, except in one scene. There is one scene where they leave the camera in somehow. It's one of those 360 spins where they're in the center of the computer room. The camera gets picked up then, but for the
I didn't catch that. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't either until I watched the documentary on the movie where they mentioned leaving that in. So I cheated because I couldn't see it either. But apparently they had purposely left this in to sort of make it make the creators of the fake world, being the movie, also present in the movie, that type of thing. Their little meta commentary.
It's time for question 2.
What did Volma draw?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
I have the Spartan and the turtle.
Okay, and Ryan, you're next. What do you have?
Oh, that was more specific. I was just going to say the Greek myth.
Okay, and Nick, what do you have?
Yeah, I couldn't remember the specifics, so I said ancient guy and turtle.
Okay, very good. That's points for everyone.
Woohoo!
All right, does anybody remember what it was? What the point of the drawing was, or what the drawing was of?
Wasn't like a paradigm or something like
It was a paradox. Yeah.
Paradox. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Para something.
Para something. Yes.
It was something along the lines of you could never get to what you're trying to achieve. It was
Exactly.
very asymptotic.
But then it had a literal clue too, that like something about the initials led to something. So it worked on, I guess, a couple levels.
It's Zeno's paradox, which in German, I guess, is Zenos, CEN, which leads them to the guy who was killed, the nobody. But yeah, Zeno's paradox is why we have
Christopher Nobody.
Christopher Nobody. Yeah. But yeah, Zeno's paradox is why we have calculus. The point of the paradox is like, if Achilles walks, Achilles is the soldier guy. He's not a Spartan, but we'll forgive KJ. He's yeah. He is
ancient Greek, isn't, or Roman.
That's why I just went with ancient guy. I couldn't remember.
But the idea is, if Achilles walks 100 yards and then a turtle walks half of that, a turtle can always close the gap halfway between Achilles. So how is it that Achilles can outrun a turtle, right? And Achilles is like the greatest warrior, you know, so he should be able to outrun anything. And so basically they invented calculus to explain it. That's where differential calculus comes from. But in the movie, they give kind of a different answer, right? When they mentioned Zeno's paradox, it was to show that movement is an illusion.
This is the scene where they're in, it looked like a mall cafe to me. And again, he's trying all the different seats. It's him and his friend, Franz. Hans and Franz. The you know,
we bump you up.
This is a bit of a tangent, but that scene very much so reminded me of World of Apu, when Apu meets his friend before they go to the wedding.
Pulu, yeah.
Pulu, yeah. That you know, they're sitting in a cafe, they're kind of eating, it's very relaxed. So I thought that reminded me of World of Apu.
Okay, I did not expect that. I guess we could use this as a prompt to talk about the greater mystery outside of the corporate espionage going on, and what people thought about that, if they found that convincing or interesting in any way. So
I have a lewd joke. Can we do lewd jokes on Talking Fiction Trivia? This is it has to do with Zeno's paradox. It's lewd. All right. There's a scientist and he says, hey, at the end of the hallway is a beautiful person, but you can never get there if you only go halfway at a time, right? You go half and then half and then half and half. The engineer says, yeah, but I can get close enough to do what I want to do.
Very appropriate.
Sorry, audience. Sorry.
It fits the theme of this episode or the show, I should say.
Yeah.
But going on about the bigger mystery, this movie was a whodunit, right? A big difference between this and the Matrix is the Matrix is a hero story, like a Luke Skywalker story, whereas this Mr. Stiller is a detective, really, and he's trying to figure out what happened to Lauza, and then what is the world on a wire, whatever, what is this, like whatever you want to call it. So I think the bigger mystery in the end, it didn't matter, because like we're saying, it was more the style, right? It wasn't, it mattered for the plot, but I don't think it mattered so much for the movie.
See, for me, I knew very early on where they were going, and it was almost like slowly, and I mean very slowly, peeling an onion back to see all the layers until they actually finally say that thing I knew all along was the truth, that he was in the simulacrum, which, by the way, I texted you guys when I was like 10 minutes into the film. I said, don't spoil it for me, but when are they going to just say, hey, he's a simulation?
Yeah, it is both kind of frustrating in the sense that, you kind of know it's happening. And a lot of the movie, I think, is much more about the style also of the performance. So the way these very, very hip people are also very, very bored. Stiller is the exception. It's why he seems so much more crazy, in part because the actor's like really swinging for the fences, but also in part because everybody else is sort of glassy-eyed. They're sort of glazed over. I mean, this is like whatever world they built is just infected with ennui, and so all of these beautiful, stylish people are just too bored. They could barely move. There's the scene where they go to the weird nightclub, where Stella's new secretary takes him to the new nightclub, and there's just like these nude people dancing, and she's walking through, like looking at them, looking at the men, presumably to see who she finds attractive or who she wants to take home, and just no one is really emoting. They're dancing, but with almost kind of blank expressions, and that seems to be more important than like, is the world a simulation? Of course it's a simulation, but it's also I think it's both recognizable, but also recognizable in the sense of how kind of bland everyone has become. I think we're supposed to see that in our own world.
I kept waiting for Gloria to have like a Total Recall moment where like her head, where she just like kept repeating the same line. She was stuck, and then eventually like her head exploded. But did you guys also, what did you think about the like Marlena Dietrich projection that was going on there? Which I actually didn't mean to look this up, but I was just like going through IMDb to refresh myself with the characters, and it's actually the song is the Marlena Dietrich famously performs in Dusty Rides Again, but in this one it's credited to Fassbinder's then wife, which just as having sung it, not that she wrote it or anything like that. And they were only married for a couple of years, but so I don't know, I don't really get like the levels that were going on there.
I like Marlena Dietrich. So Fassbinder, it was famously gay despite being married, and a lot of his later cinema, he does a lot of like kind of queer cinema stuff later on, and even a little here. And I think there's and Marlena Dietrich is also sort of a queer icon, as she comes to be recognized later on. I think there's these kind of there's bits of kind of queer elements in the nightclub scenes. Like the latter nightclub he goes to when he's on the run, there's that one maitre d', or not a maitre d', excuse me, a waiter who's sort of painted, the white face and the lipstick. I think it's that type of scene that he's trying to get at.
What about the buff cook in that same scene? I mean, that can't be hygienic.
Exactly.
You're cooking with your shirt off. I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah. But I think it is part of that kind of that sort of queer German nightlife thing that Fassbinder, a little later in his career, would look more directly at.
And the song that they were singing early on, right? It was like the boys in the background, like that one. That's what we're talking. Mm-hmm. So watching it, the second time for this, that song was kind of telling you the plot a little bit, right? The boys in the back room are deciding what's going to happen, and I don't care, right? That was her, and that's what this movie is somebody else is running the simulation. Once you figure that out, You got to stop caring because you're just a simulation.
Yeah, and also the real world is far less interesting, right? The real world is probably far less interesting than this nightclub. You know, that's probably a part of it as well. All right, at the end of round 1, we have a tie. Nick and Ryan are tied with 2 points apiece, and KJ is right behind with 1. We'll see you after these exciting messages.
Have an idea for an ad? Is it a fake product? We'll air it. Send us an audio clip of your fake ad, and after it goes through our rigorous and strict reviewing process, we'll fit it into an episode. Don't have an idea for an ad? Make one anyway and send it to fakeads@talkingpicturestrivia.com or call 201-467-8679 and leave a voicemail of your ad. You'd sound really good on radio. This ad requesting fake ads is a real ad requesting you to send us fake ads. Seriously, send us your fake ads.
And we're back. We're at the critical part of our episode where we ask the guest a key question. Ryan, if you could watch World on a Wire with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Guys, I have to admit, I can't imagine a better watching and post discussion than the three of you. I truly mean it, because we just have like the three things you want to talk about at the end of this film, which is like a deep nerdy dive with someone like KJ, who's like seen all these movies and keeps making the comparison and knows Matrix backwards and forwards, which I definitely don't. And then Nick, you did not disappoint sending, I'm assuming that was from you. Oh no, sorry, Tom, it must've been from you that was sending screenshots of some book you were reading with passages.
Yeah, that's Tom. That's not me.
Yeah. And then, Nick just like coming in with me being like, someone explain this to me, like I could barely get through it. So
this sounds like a good answer. However, how dare you make me watch this 3.5 hour movie again? How dare you? It's funny. My co-host said at the stage, like I would not like this. They saw it before me, but I didn't mind the movie. The end, I will say, got very slow. That like last half hour when he's going to the cabin and all that stuff. But I actually didn't mind the journey because it was about the experience. But yeah, I'm not watching this again.
I've seen it twice now. So
I think after you've seen it, you can put it on and watch any scene. I think any scene is now, it's kind of like The Hobbit, right? You can read any chapter of The Hobbit and enjoy it after reading. So hopefully the four of us will get to hang out. We'll put it on in the background. We'll get some chips and salsa or something. That would be great. I love it.
Would that be the best snack to have? I think this goes back to our prior season.
Wow.
No,
beer's got to be on the list.
No, some
Beer,
kind of like highball,
whiskey,
like 70s work, something you drink at work,
I want a rye for some reason.
They did whiskeys.
That.
They did a lot of whiskeys.
Yeah, because it's not a martini.
He did order something kind of weird when he was at that the film. No. When he's at that, not that film. I don't know, whatever that projection. Not the nightclub. The thing we were talking about before with the weird waiter.
Oh yeah, it's a kind of
okay, whatever that is. He ordered like some weird
Studio 54-esque.
It was like,
yeah. It wasn't something that was like, give me the the chips and salsa. Yeah. It seemed like very off for the venue.
Great.
So boar and rye.
There we go.
It's time for question 3.
Who first tells Stella he is not real?
Locked in. Yeah, I know where you go. I see that face, KJ. I know where you're going.
I'm gonna lock in, even though it's too easy. It can't be right.
Okay, well, Ryan, what do you got?
Well, I'll just get the wrong answer out of the way, which is Einstein.
Okay. Nick, KJ, you're up next.
I don't think he interacted with Vollmer. And Ava might have said something cryptic, but I'm Team Einstein here. I think it was the end of what would have been the first night of the show. Einstein escapes and he suggests that there's another level. I'm going with Einstein.
All right, and Nick.
So we're all getting 2 points, or no one's getting points, because I'm on Team Einstein as well. It's not the bodysuit, it's who it is.
Oh, you guys make me feel better.
All right. And yes, it is Einstein.
There we go.
Yeah.
Wow, I thought for sure you were alluding to
No.
some line of dialogue that
No,
was
I made it.
Copper top. That was in the Matrix episode last week. That was the big reveal that Neo should have found out when who was it? Switch calls him Copper
Yes.
Top. Yep.
That was the first time that they alluded to them being batteries. Pretty good question, if I do say so myself.
So, talking about the kind of the nature of reality, it's about my own reading of this movie, and especially of the end, the last scene, is that no reality is really depicted as more real than any other one. I think the final scene of the movie,
where they're in like an empty hotel room.
It's
but
like
the windows
they
open. They open.
But you can't even see out them. There's like
I saw
other
a clock tower.
blinds
There was a
there.
clock tower.
There's a little, it's
I would be like, put me back in.
Yeah.
This is
Put me
terrible.
back in the box.
Yeah, it's very constrained. It's interesting. So it's based on an American novel, Simulacron 3. And in the American novel, if you read parts of it, read the ending, he comes out. The characters have different names because it's an American novel. And they're like, okay, things here aren't quite as nice. We made it nicer in your world. But you'll get used to it. The moon is only about the third the size that you're used to. But it'll be fine. That type of thing. And there's this kind of idea in the book that I think is also in the movie of like the real is sort of less real than this invented space. And then like the invented space and the real are sort of hard to distinguish. And I was wondering what people thought of that reading, or thought of the ending, or how this movie is looking at these kind of different layers of reality.
I absolutely love that in 1973 they went for the full mind body swap. I mean, I just thought that was so cool that they did that. They're showing us that what actually dictates who you are these like electrical processes in your synapse versus your actual corporeal body. So I really did like that implementation of how he could move from the simulation into the real world. Now, is that the real world? Who knows? That's the next 3.5 hours of my life when they reboot this sucker. But I did really enjoy that they went there, especially at this time period in history.
World on a Wire Reloaded. World on a Wire Revolutions. World on a Wire
I
Resurrection.
thought it was World on Wires. We go plural.
I was thinking of Stiller as sort of like one of the original NPCs that are given life, just because like what makes him so special, like Neo's chosen or whatever. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but like what makes Stiller worthy to go to the other world. And even in the 13th floor, it's more clear that Ava has chosen him because he's been programmed and he's just a nice guy, and she falls in love with him, and so she enters the world to be like, I want to spend time with you. I fall in love with you from afar. And whereas Ava is just like this amazing ice queen, like nothing about her.
So you'll have to refresh my memory. I think in my lifetime, I have seen the 13th floor, but it was so long ago, probably when it first came out. Is that a reboot or is that something connected to this?
It's made from the same source material, which is actually surprising to me because they have the same names, except Lausa. I don't know. I can't remember that. Now I feel like,
I have to say
Lausa?
the German did actually improve my enjoyment of this.
It made it
great.
I
have to say that.
Lausa. Stiller.
He's a megalomaniac, however they said that.
So in the 13th floor, she's just likes this guy. That's her drive.
So in the 13th floor,
All right.
the Ava character, I don't remember her name, but she is married to the equivalent of Fred Stiller in the real world. But Fred Stiller goes mad with power as he's controlling this simulation. She falls in love with Fred Stiller at level -1 or whatever you want to call it. So then she wants to pull him out so that she gets good Fred Stiller, which
they did that.
They did that.
Right?
That's in World of Wire.
Yeah,
there's a little
bit. They literally said he was a megalomaniac. I used to be in love with him. He's playing God, and she swaps him. So
Yeah, and he's based on
and he's a legit copy of the Fred Stieler in the real world.
Yeah.
So I think they
Yeah.
did something similar. I mean, this episode isn't about the 13th floor, and nor have I seen it enough to really talk intelligently about it. But yeah, I didn't know that they were the same source material. Now I might have to just watch it and regret that I watched it based on Ryan's strong recommendation there.
Is like when they get out, do you get the real world a lot in the 13th floor?
Not a lot, but you do get a shot, and basically they step outside on the balcony, and it looks like most of the world, like the sea rose, or they're just in a nice area. I don't know. One of the two things. The water's pretty high.
The beach, the sea rose.
And there's skyscrapers out in the distance that look like current day Singapore, maybe, but 20 years ago, probably.
It's like right out of Hackers or something. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So Tom, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say it was a made-for-TV movie. What were they going to show is the real world. So instead of showing you, they left it up to the imagination, and that's why the blinds were closed.
But they did open. That's the key, because I thought they were going to say that they were stuck in another box. But then when the blinds open, it gave me hope that they were in the real world.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence that they're not in the real world. I think when you decide to depict the real world as just a kind of like cage-like room that doesn't really have a lot of character to it, as opposed to, I don't know, like they could go outside into a field or to the risen ocean of the 13th floor, or whatever it is, and instead they have this room that the blinds don't even open fully, right? They
do go up at one point, but I personally think it was a choice by the director, because he wanted to show that the guy was happy to be, air quotes, alive, and he was touching fabrics that were real, not simulations. So I think there was a lot of power in him appreciating even the sparse nature of that room.
This is going to get weird, but do you guys ever have a thought exercise that what if you woke up and Ben Franklin was like, I don't know, in your basement, or Tesla or somebody, and like what you would do to try
I haven't had that experience.
No, go on.
Go on.
To acclimate.
Did you watch Bill and Ted before you fell asleep, perhaps?
So, a side note, the new Bill and Ted is excellent. No, but I often think about it. If somebody from 100, 200, 300 years ago all of a sudden popped into existence here, how would you get them ready to go outside? And I think it would take a while. I think you'd have to slowly introduce them to things, get them ready for some of the new ideas we have.
You'd have a language barrier, even if it was English.
There is, in fact, an entire movie exploring this very thing, which is Encino Man. But we can save that for another watch.
So I just assumed Ava was protecting him until, right? Who knows what's out there? I mean, it could be anything.
I don't know.
Maybe that's...
I mean, as far as we know, it's the same world, right? It's the same time period, so to speak.
Well, the only thing we have to go on is in Stiller's world, they were using the simulation to predict transportation. So presumably they were trying to speed up time. So I had assumed if Stiller was in 73, then when he got to Ava's world, it was back a little bit because they were using Stiller's world for the same thing, economic predictions. But that was my headcanon, not...
Yeah.
Also, they said that guy, Fred Stieler, the real one, got, power hungry, and maybe it was his toy at that point. So that's kind of how I took it, that maybe it wasn't even being used for its purpose.
Yeah, my kind of reading of the ending, and this might also be headcanon, is that none of these worlds end up being particularly appealing, right? That they all are sort of being, they're all tools, right? That's what you see in the end. You see a bunch of kind of utilized planes of existence and not, quote unquote, natural. And I think that choosing to do that last scene in that kind of confined space is, I don't know, I felt sort of spoke to that interpretation.
So Tom, to get personal here for a moment, if you knew this was a simulation and someone said, hey, here's an exit to the next level up or the real world, but it's boring, would you still go, or would you want to cipher back? What?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
Because in this movie, everybody goes insane when they
Mhm.
find out they're in a simulation,
Mhm.
except Stiller, right? He's a little bit like Frodo. He can handle it better than the rest, but I think he still wants to get to the real world, even if
Okay.
it's the same
So
or like it.
I think you want to get to the real, right? That's what. So I think the problem is there's this idea of the real that no one actually has in the movie. We see at the end the real is that room, but who are we in that room with? We have Fred Stiller, who's an unreal person made real, made flesh, and he's with somebody whose name we don't even know, right? We don't. That woman is not Ava. That's a made up name. Volma never had a daughter, right? She's just some woman, and so whatever she represents Fulmer's daughter in these fictional spaces, but in the real space, what is she signifying? We don't have a signified, right? We have a signifier, no signified. And so in the end, the only signified is this kind of caged space, and the only kind of flesh and blood in there is something that has no name, no identity. And so I think you're presuming the real to be accessible when you say, would you go to the real? Except it's boring. It's not an issue of if it's boring. The issue is, has it ceased to really be recognizable as real?
The reality is he didn't know it was even a possibility. When he found out he was a simulation and Ava came up, he's like, I don't care what you do with me. Put me out of my misery pretty much, because I'm not real. So it wasn't necessarily an aspiration. I know yours is, KJ's question is more theoretical, but in the confines of the film, he didn't even know that was a possibility until Ava said, I want to help you.
Yeah. What if you're in a story? And not only that, you're in a story, there is nothing outside of storiness. The quality of life is the quality of a story or a narrative. I think that's what the movie is more or less positing. Or that might be a little of my headcanon.
It's time for question 4.
What does Ava transform into?
Locked in, specific lock-in.
Okay, it's a specific lock-in.
Locked in.
I have no idea. I guess I'll lock in just to move things along.
Do you know? Any idea? Hey, yep, Ryan, you're up first. You locked in last.
No, just transform. She just disappears. What does she transform into? What do you mean?
What did she takes another form?
I don't know. I think I missed this whole part. I don't know how I don't no idea. Someone else go. I got nothing.
Okay. Who locked in next was KJ.
So in the scene towards the end of the movie, and I agree, Nick, the movie falls apart as it goes on.
Yeah.
So this is the second time Stiller shoots at Ava. So Tom, I disagree with the question, but the answer you're looking for is German Shepherd.
Oh man, KJ got the specific lock-in. It is not just a dog, it is a German Shepherd.
All right, very good. And so Nick wins the episode.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I had dog, but yeah, sure, German Shepherd.
Well,
So
German movie, German Shepherd. I mean, come on.
I'm sure they don't think that way.
They just think
well, we're making a German movie because we're German. So
to them, it's just a shepherd.
Yeah. So why do you disagree with the question?
Because in my head canon, she disappeared, sure, which created a glitch in the matrix, and the quickest thing the AI could come up with was a German Shepherd.
I feel we could create a spin-off podcast called Headcanon, in which we make up what we think the movie is actually thinking. It may have more listeners.
It would be terrible, but it would be entertaining.
Yes, it could be short. Maybe we should make them very.
So I obviously totally missed that she turned into the dog. I don't know what I like.
She went in the woods, remember?
Yeah. But anyway, but it does remind me that I did want to ask you guys, why didn't they just remove the memory of Laus from Stiller? Like they seem to have been able to do it to everybody else.
The real Stiller like toying with this guy. They mentioned that. So he actually like got off on his fear and all of that. So it was it was personal. Like it was almost enjoyment for him. They did address it.
Ah, I missed that one too. Thank you.
It was
Yeah.
when Ava was explaining to simulation Stiller who the real Stiller was, the megalomaniac Stiller.
So I did want to talk about it. We've touched on her a little bit already because I think she's one of the kind of the links to this film. And since we have, let's transition into either our lead, good old Fred, who we haven't discussed at length, or the way in which the parameters of the world are situated. And I think we could start with good old Fred. What did we think of poor Mr. Stiller?
He definitely has undiagnosed ADD. Just the small part you guys mentioned about all the chairs. It's amazing. Like they're having legitimate conversations with him and Mr. Steele, whoever that guy's real name is. And they're like sitting down and he's running around the room, opening up a door, going.
It's almost like a play
like,
where they just need to have movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's a finite set. And they're like, let's keep it interesting.
Even when they're having like a business discussion between Siskin and him, he's spinning around on his chair. Like
Both of them.
It made no sense to me. Like they both got some serious problems, but it was like normal.
Although you said that you thought he was keeping it together and didn't go insane. And I didn't think so. Like I thought he was unraveling. And so that spinning around in his chair and his bizarre, it's hard to pick up because it's a 70s European movie. There's a lot of bizarre antics that like, whereas like, you watch the American version and you're like, okay, it's kicking between the eyes, bizarre antics. Got it, but it's more subtle in these kinds of movies. But I didn't think he was keeping it together quite as well as you did.
Well, so Volmer, was that the first guy who died?
Mhm.
Right. So he lasted about 10 minutes. Stiller lasted 3.
We don't know how long
hours.
Volmer was dealing with that information.
That's true.
He could have
That's
had
true.
another 3.5 hours just him. The
But
prequel.
Franz,
Well,
man. Franz was worse than Boromir, right? Like he went right over the edge as soon as he found out.
I feel bad for Laus, actually. Lausa. He just got deleted.
Lausa.
I'm going to tell you something.
Oh yeah, he found out too, right? He became Christopher Nobody. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, Christopher Nobody was a different person.
Right.
We
But
never
he
met
was
him.
the first time they introduced the threat. Right. That's the threat to all the characters now. Once you realize that Fred and that assistant guy can delete somebody,
Mhm.
and then Einstein says, "Hey, you're in a simulation." You're like, "Oh boy, anybody can be deleted at any time."
Yeah, the movement, the choice of movement is very odd. I think it has to do with this kind of sense of boredom, right? Like I think the movie is, despite being a mystery with with like a Matrix parallel, is really about a bunch of people who are really, really bored, a lot of them. And Stiller kind of shines out from that as almost like the ADD guy, because he has something to be excited about now, even if it is an existential crisis. I mean, it's odd. Imagine being so bored with everything in your life that an existential crisis is the thing that gets the dopamines working, right? That seems to be the other side of the panic of, if nothing's real, or can I access the real? It's you start to see everything else as sort of monotone or cold.
But even Stiller wasn't immune to being bored, right?
No, yeah.
That woman gets killed by a pallet of cinder blocks.
Mhm.
And he just reaches down like, oh, she did have a lighter, and then lights his cigarette and walks away.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's part of it, right? I think that this is also pre-panic Stiller.
True, right?
Mhm.
This is before he was enlightened, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like when that's an interesting way of putting it. Enlightenment, right? This is the cost of enlightenment, and everything else seems so kind of boring and plush once you learn, that your existence is fragile.
There's a direct correlation to that concept and the Matrix, like specifically what Cypher goes through. He was living a cush life in the Matrix. He got out, he took the wrong pill, and he can't wait to get back into the illusion because the real world is harsh, boring, and not interesting. So that's when you guys went down that path. That jumped out at me right away.
Yeah, I've talked to KJ about this, but I still think the Matrix, and this is when Jean Baudrillard was invited to work on the Matrix, this is what he said in his rejection of that offer, was that the Matrix still posits a distinct real and a distinct unreal, a distinct hyper reality and a distinct reality, even if that reality is ugly and decaying, right? It's still a place of freedom and it's still accessible. And I think with this movie, that clear distinction is more difficult to make.
It's time for Movie Rent.
I was just along for the ride for this one. I felt like this was all about like the visuals and the mood and you know, Germany in 1973, just taking it all in. So I was less obsessed with what's world and what the meaning of it all was. And I was looking forward to watching you guys get into all that. But for me, I was just like, kick back, enjoy.
And boy, did we. Huh?
I think that's the movie's strength, is any frame of the movie it's kind of beautiful. It's kind of gorgeous. It's great. Even in its, 4:3 presentation, right? The glass, the mirrors, the carpets, the colors,
the carpets,
right?
I have to say this, I mean, honestly, this looks just like my co-working space. I almost want to like send you guys a link to my co-working space's website and you'd be like, holy smokes, like you're not kidding.
Work for IKZ. Is that the?
Yes, that's where I work.
No, I completely agree. That's what I liked about this movie. It was the style, same as the Matrix, right? That's what won our hearts with the Matrix, is the style.
In addition to the visuals, I also thought the audio was a little interesting. Specifically, something that jumped out at me was the footsteps. They were very prominent when they were running, when they were doing things. I don't know why. They just like echoed the scenes, even when there was in an environment where there should be no echoes. Did you guys pick that up as well?
I didn't, but I can imagine the megalomaniac
Really?
saying, set footstep volume to 200%, or I guess it would be a German accent, not a.
No, you're usually the sound guy. That's why
Yeah.
I thought you might have had that jump out at you. I don't know. Maybe it was these amazing new AirPods I purchased that
Ooh.
enhanced the sound quality. Apple, you can sponsor us.
KJ already admitted he watched it on his phone, which gives him the cinema.
Oh, yeah,
the
that's
cinephile
why.
finger wag here.
Oh yes, tisk tisk.
What is considered like the grandfather, or let's say grandmother? What is considered the grandmother of like we are living in a simulation book, literature, source material?
Oh Lord, there's
Good question.
one from the 1950s. It was a short story in which it was kind of like simulated reality. The tunnel,
Like an Asimov, or like who was the short story?
Frederick Pohl was the person, Pohl, who I'm not familiar with. And the story from 55 was The Tunnel Under the World, in which also actually dealt with simulated reality in order to make predictions about corporate investments. Are we in a real world or not? It was Philip K. Dick in 59 has a book, Time Out of Joint, which does the same thing. And we also saw that with it was the movie that was made. It was the book that was eventually made into the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where Arnold Schwarzenegger is given a vacation in his mind.
Is this a second Total Recall reference in one episode?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Total Recall. Yeah, exactly. Philip K. Dick's I can't remember the title of the book now. It's one of his elaborate titles. But Dick had an earlier work where he did the same thing, where it's a man living in a simulated town and he doesn't know he's in a simulated town. Thinking back before that, I can't think of another work before like the mid 20th century where it's like we're in the eye of God, we're in the eye of someone else's reality.
There is a Wikipedia page where it references simulated reality and fiction. Now, I don't know if it's the exact computer simulation we're looking at, but I do see things that go back into the 50s, 60s.
Yeah, I cannot think of anything before the 50s.
Oh, wait, actually, Simulacron 3 was made in 1964. That's what this is based off of.
Yeah,
World on a Wire.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, Simulacrum 3 is
Yeah.
Daniel Gilroy's book. He's a Louisiana author.
The one you mentioned, Tom, The Tunnel of the World, I do see here, 1955. I see something called The Veldt in 1951, a short story from The Illustrated Man. This grim tale describes two children who prefer their simulated reality nursery to their parents.
But if you really want to go back, you go back to the 17th century and talk about Descartes' meditation, which is where the first time we get like, what if you're a brain in a vat, right? That's the whole, the whole Enlightenment project.
I got one further back from you. Republic, Plato, 380 BC, contains the allegory of the cave.
Yeah, that's book 7 of Plato's Republic.
So that might be the answer.
Yeah.
To the question.
Yeah, but in both cases, you do have both in Plato and in Descartes, this is definitely doing the Descartes thing, right? Except they're not really people. So it's probably more Platonic, wouldn't you say, than Cartesian?
Oh, I would say that definitely.
Probably Platonic, Tom.
Yeah. Well, because they're it's not the idea of like you're a mind in a vat, right? It's and there's like the real reality or something. It's like you're a person who isn't seeing the real world, right? You're sitting in the cave looking at the shadows and thinking.
Well, they also didn't have the technology or the thought process, so I think that's why it's not a specific one-to-one.
What about Caligari?
What about Caligari?
Caligari is a similar idea, right? The whole movie is.
I was just going to say. I mean, obviously, I think Therefore I Am is like the heart of this movie. So
yeah,
it's related. You're right. It's interesting.
Yeah, Caligari also does that a little bit. It's but it's not. But the difference there is it's not the demon that's making the world of Caligari. It's Caligari's own mental illness. Well, with Descartes, it's the imagine you're a brain in a vat and there's a demon who's projecting this world around you. So it's a little different in that sense, but I guess we could say that it's either Plato or Descartes invented this genre.
So one other movie to throw out as a similarity, you guys remember watching M?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In this one, after Franz goes over into the water, I guess, the whole crowd starts saying murder, murder. It just reminded me of it.
They're pretty much the same movie. I mean,
can I recommend one more German film since these all going to be German films?
Yeah.
There's a film probably like 10 years ago or so called The Wall. That's a German film. And it's sort of, like conceptual science fiction light, which is just that like a woman goes to a remote mountain cabin and then sometime during the night, an invisible wall builds around her and she can't leave. And it's just like her whole world has been frozen. And like, it's like she's stuck inside this very small, and it's very beautiful and very almost relaxing to watch, even though it's an existential crisis.
Feature length film. Interesting.
Great. Yeah, no, I'll add that to the list.
Just called, what was it called? Just The Wall?
The Wall, yeah.
I'd like to once again humbly congratulate our winner of the week, which is me, Nick. Woohoo! I really didn't think I'd take this one down, but flawless victory. I shocked myself on this one.
You did just finish watching it mere moments ago.
That doesn't always help.
I will say in my own defense too, not only did I appear to space out in certain points, but I watched it a full week ago because I thought we were recording last week. So I will admit that I am not the greatest with dates, but I am also at a disadvantage because I watched it more than a week ago.
Fair enough. You can find more of our content wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel, Twitter @Talking Studios, and our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com. We are extremely grateful to all those who subscribe, like, follow, and leave a review. Do you remember Gunter Lauser? Why or why not? Let us know on Twitter, talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com, or give us a call at 201-467-8679. Thanks again, Ryan, for joining us today. Where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Twitter @IndieArtsVoice or @Team Smart House. Smart House is just wrapping up a lot of work with Doc NYC, so you will miss the festival, but you should go to their website and curate your Netflix feed for the next year because there are some awesome documentaries, including the opening night film, which was called Listening to Kenny G, about the music of Kenny G, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm sure our audience will check that out.
Also, I'll recommend your podcast if that's okay. I listened.
Oh, thanks.
I said for anybody who's a fan of the Dune movie, the new Dune movie. Ryan has a good
Ooh, I
podcast
was.
episode on the connections between Dune and the Pacific Northwest. So you should check that out.
Thanks.
You could find me on Twitter at Thomas Lehman15. And also, please check out our sister podcast, Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side, where we go into the movies in a little more depth.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nickname. Join us next time when we discuss Tom's recommendation from 1982, The Return of Martin Guerre. Stay tuned for our first impressions of this film.
Ding, 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 ding.
Next week, we'll be discussing The Return of Martin Guerre from 1982. What were our first thoughts and impressions of this film?
So this is the first time I've watched this movie. I suggested it without actually having seen it or really knowing very much about it. I know nothing about the director. I don't even know what other movies he's made. I know some stuff about Gerard Depardieu, but that's about it. And I was looking for something that would work with our Matrix theme, but wasn't science fiction. So that was the kind of the requirement I placed on myself, was I had to find something that fit with the Matrix, but wasn't science fiction. And I think this movie kind of works. I have an argument why it works, so we'll see if anybody finds that convincing. However, I watched this movie on my computer and I really liked it. It's this little curio. I described that way to KJ, which is this weird, kind of small, interesting thing that doesn't exactly fit into a specific box, but also isn't particularly grand or large in scale. It's fairly diminutive in its presentation, and I think Gerard Depardieu is deeply charming in this. He carries this picture quite lovingly. So I enjoyed this, and I was quite surprised by it.
Yeah, as Tom mentioned, this summer, when we decided we were going to do a Matrix lead up, Tom said, "Hey, I might do Return of Martin." So I grabbed my phone, I watched the movie, and it's a fun little movie. I did enjoy it. I'll be interested to hear Tom's views on how it relates to the Matrix. But one of my favorite things about this movie has been telling other people the plot, which, normally telling people plots of movie is boring, and maybe they've all been bored, but it's really fun to walk through this plot with somebody who hasn't seen it, especially when you get to the end, the big twist ending, and you get to say they start all over again. So yeah, it was a fun little movie.
I like how you mentioned plot, KJ, because if you really storyboard this, there really isn't much of a plot, yet it still did engage me and keep me interested through the whole thing. It's more of trying to reassure yourself that he is who he says, or pick holes at it to find out why he's not. So I did find it interesting, and it did keep my it kept me interested the whole time. The one thing I will say is I watched this in a dub version, which I usually like to watch in the original language, but just to hedge my bets, I watched it dubbed and also with subtitles, which I think was optimal because the French accent of the dub version was kind of distracting. So I'm not really sure if I made the right call there, but I made it through.